using this quote from Lady Gaga in our bulletin.
Like you do.
Like you do. This quote where she says something like, the most lonesome thing is to be famous.
Hey everybody, here we are, another episode of The Word Made Fresh, and is this, what is this?
Look, we're in the same.
I'm here in town, so we're recording. We do that once in a while. You're used to this by now. We are talking about the text for Sunday, February 25th. Yep, okay. And it is Mark chapter 10, verses 32 to 52. There's a lot going on in here, from a little bit of Lady Gaga, apparently, and then blind Bartimaeus. What is this text? Give us like the cliff notes.
Yeah, so there's 3 stories in this one, and we're not surprised because it's Mark. Remember, you read Mark with the ticking clock in your head because he's moving really quick. So Jesus is foretelling his death. This is the 3rd foretelling. There's a request of James and John to sit on Jesus' right side and Jesus' left side. And there is that wonderful, wonderful story of blind Bartimaeus who asks Jesus to give him his sight again.
Again?
Yeah. He says, I want to see again.
Again.
Right? Yeah. So there's that he saw before. Right?
Ooh. Okay, so you're preaching Bartimaeus? Is that the easy sermon for this one?
I'm actually not preaching Bartimaeus. I think I'm preaching James and John. And this notion of being famous. So I'm like in the thick of that. I have a 13-year-old, and there's all of this desire to be famous and likes and shares and all of that. But what that does to us, what does fame do to us? Jesus was famous, and maybe not the best ways, infamous perhaps. It didn't end so well, but he does resurrect, as Jim pointed out. But in the Gospel of Mark, he doesn't. But
in the earliest version of the Gospel of Mark, for anyone who's like, but I read the book. Yeah, that's
I read the book. I know how it is. Right. But also this notion, I'm using this quote from Lady Gaga in our bulletin.
Like you do.
Like you do. This quote where she says something like, the most lonesome thing is to be famous. It really does remove you from community. But there is also this notion that we heard in our Ash Wednesday service from our colleague, Reverend Dr. Lisa M. Weaver, that the mom, James and John's mother, also approached Jesus about making her sons famous, putting one on the right and one on the left. And she suggested that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So there's this interesting notion of people pushing Jesus to give them place and pride and fame. But also, what do we mean? And do we really know what we're asking for when we say we want to be that person? I think it's an interesting question. It's an interesting conversation.
Okay, it makes me think just how in the world today, once upon a time when I was young, which was decades ago now, I wanted to be a baseball player when I grew up. And I just think of the things kids want to be when they grow up, Right. Now, a common goal of a kid is I want to be a YouTuber.
That's right.
Or like I'm getting on TikTok to go viral. I want that moment of fame. And it just makes me think of like the way James and John asked the question then. We haven't stopped asking it. And like you said, it manifests in different ways. But are we always aware of what the ramifications of getting that dream might actually then be?
Right. And I would encourage you to do what I did. I started looking for quotes about fame and being famous. And they're not particularly positive from folks that we know, athletes, actors, talking about what it has done to their lives. A handful of them really appreciate it. They're able to use that platform to make a difference in the world, or they just really love being able to get great seats at restaurants. But by and large, most of them either don't like it or they appreciate the things that it gets them, but also long for and miss the things that they've lost because of it.
So how do you connect all this to Lent? Because your Sunday is Lent 2.
Right.
We're talking about true religion, love poured out. That's the lens we're looking at a lot of Lent through at Riverside. How are any of that overlapping in what you're scheming?
Absolutely. So it's interesting, I think, to look at what James and John, the brothers, want versus what Bartimaeus wants. So Bartimaeus wants to see again. The 2 brothers want to be famous. And I think the question for us during Lent is, what do we want? Do we want to follow Jesus? Do we want to see again? Do we want to be connected to what this carpenter that we follow is doing? Or do we just kind of want to be on his coattails, kind of like catching whatever glitter is coming from him? And of course, That's not Jesus's shtick. You know, he's, even though he has just done the transfiguration and we got that sparkly, shiny Jesus, that's really not who he is. He is not trying to be famous. He's trying to be faithful.
Yeah.
He's trying to share the love of the God who has sent him here to help us to see anew. And I think to put Bartimaeus and his wants and desires in conversation with James and John is what's helpful for us during Lent, where we're trying to reimagine and what did we just talk about in our retreat?
Replicate or reimagine.
Replicate or reimagine our lives. I think that's the invitation to Lent every year. What have we done in this last year, since last Lent, that we want to replicate? And what have we done that maybe we need and want to reimagine?
Ooh. Well, that's a sermon to end on right there. So someone preach that one as well. As always, leave us your questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, all of it in the comments below. Join us this Sunday, Open Bible Study. If you're online, we have one on Zoom you could join. If you can make it to the building, there's one in the building you can join. So they're going to be great talking about this text. Join us for worship. Hear what actually ends up coming out of this Lady Gaga inspired sermon. Are we going to sing any Lady Gaga? Oh.
I actually don't know a whole lot.
Can the choir do rah, 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 rah? I feel like the organ needs to play that.
That would be pretty awesome.
I'll email Alan.
Yeah.
All of that. So now you got to come to church to see if that happens.
Yeah, see if that happens. I think Alan's going to be like, what? Lady Gaga? I don't do that.
We'll talk to you again next week. See you then.